Following on from yesterday, so Pat very kindly covered what you need to do to get your CQC registration and how you get that up and running. And today we're going to go on forwards from that and actually learn a little bit about when you actually open, what the hell do you actually need to do in your practice from a compliance point of view. So, very kindly, Claire, my own practice manager, has agreed to come up and obviously give experience from actually what it's like in real life, running it, doing it, and building it within your own practice. And she's going to share that experience with Pat. So, thank you both very much.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, Bobby. And hello again, everyone. Thank you for coming, dragging yourselves away from the rather lovely coffee and things over there to come back for which I know CQC is not everybody's favourite subject. But as we said yesterday, if you don't have a compliant business, you don't have a business. Huge thank yous to Claire for coming to join me. Now, as Bobby said, what we did yesterday was how to get over the line and get your practice registered with CQC. It doesn't stop there though, so it's an ongoing process. So I talked to you yesterday about my journey to get here. Didn't really talk much about what I do now. So what I do now is I'm the clinical director at FMC, the people who do Dentistry magazine and all the awards. And we have launched a new division at the company, which is called Dentistry Practice Services. Compliance is one element of that, but it's not the only element. So we've got HR, we've got consent, we've got rota system. We're aiming to provide a sort of one-stop shop for everything that practices need from a professional perspective going forward. And my job is to make sure that everything we do is compliant, accurate, and helpful, and also insightful, and comes from 30 years of experience of doing this stuff. So that's what I do now, and I'll weave that in a little bit into what we're talking about today. The really important part of today, though, is this is what the CQC expects and looks for. And Claire is then going to say, and this is how we manage it in practice, because that's what you need to know most of all. Not what the CQC is doing, because to you at the moment they're kind of a remote figure, apart from people who've just had the trauma of having their CQC registration and their registered manager interviews. But for the rest of you, for most of the time, they're a distant figure. So we'll just talk a little bit about what the CQC is looking for, and Claire will add in, and this is how we do it in practice. So what I'm hoping you'll get out of this bit is how you manage your compliance after registration, what the compliance pitfalls are, and there are lots of them, and then how to avoid them, and try and make sure that your practice is always inspection ready. That's a tall order. There isn't a single practice in the country, my own included, and Bobby and Claire's included, that is compliant every minute of every day, because there are lots and lots of things you have to do all the time to keep your practice compliant. It's much better though to stay on top of things than it is though to let things slip, and we'll talk about what happens in that case. Above all, it's a fantastic opportunity to involve your whole team. Now, I think it was quite a revelation to me when we really looked at compliance in our practice on a much more team-based level. So what we came up with was delegating tasks that are not normally done by an individual, say by a receptionist, and giving them compliance tasks to do so that they felt very much involved in the whole process as well. And it was really, really motivational, because it gave this team effort of we're all working towards the same thing. And what is not okay is what used to be the case, which was compliance was something hideously horrible that we gave to the practice manager to do on a Friday afternoon while everybody else did something more interesting. So really, the message from this morning is that compliance is a team game, and that's what Claire will talk about as well. So the CQC looks for evidence that your practice provides care that is safe, that it's effective, that you are caring, that you are responsive to your patient's needs and that your practice is well led. Now you can see there that I've highlighted two of those things as in red, and that's because those are the two areas that are most often non-compliant. So safe is a huge subject. It's a huge area. It includes just about everything you can think of in the practice. So it's infection control, it's healthcare waste, it's radiation protection, it's electrical safety. It's lots and lots of things that go together to make your practice safe. Well-led, that is something that we very often struggle with. Many speakers have spoken about the difference between your clinical skills and your business skills. And your business skills are what you need to ensure that your practice is well-led. Now, people rail and riot and hate the CQC and speak against them. Let me ask you, which one of those would you not want to be? Because that is what the CQC is coming to inspect. Are you safe? Are you effective? Are you responsive? Are you caring? And are you well led? Those are all things that go to make a successful practice. And there isn't one thing there that you wouldn't want to be, you wouldn't want to be said about your practice. So what does that mean and how do they do it? Okay, so I'm just going to skip through some elements quite quickly, and then I'm going to focus more on other elements because we have limited time, and actually the most important part, as I said, is what Claire and her team do in the practice. So the key areas they focus on: always infection prevention and control. You would expect that. Staffing's a really big area for them. We'll talk more about that in a minute and be really interested in Claire's input into that as well. So recruitment processes, do you have enough competent staff, training and supervision, good governance, that's the well-led bit which we'll talk about through everything this morning. Your equipment, premises, risk assessments, how you manage your medicines, how you manage complaints. Safeguarding, always a really big issue for the CQC, always. They will always ask you about safeguarding, and the Mental Capacity Act. And they will expect everyone in the practice to know the answers to their questions. It is such an important subject. Consent and patient records. A lot of people run away with the idea that they're not going to talk to associates, they're not going to look at patient records. Wrong. They will speak to everyone and they will look at patient records. Plus also, at all CQC inspections, they have a CQC inspector and they have a GDC registrant. And the GDC registrant's job is to look at patient records and check on consent. So I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through, and demonstrating that you provide caring and responsive care. So those are the areas that they focus on, including probably very high up on their list of priorities is fire safety. Now that has got considerably, it's got a considerably higher profile since Grenfell Tower. And you would expect that. So, you know, fire is one of those things that you don't really think about until it's too late. Now, I've seen a number of practices burn down completely, so I do think that it's very important to focus on that. I see lots and lots of examples of fire risk assessments that have been done by a fire risk assessor, but yet none of the actions have been followed up, which makes a nonsense out of doing it. So those are all the sort of fire things that they'll look at. And so how do they do that? Well, they've restructured in the last couple of years how they do things. So what they do now is they have quality statements and evidence that you comply with these quality statements. And the idea is to make this, is to make it more even across all of health and social care. Whether it's achieving that, I couldn't be completely sure. But bear in mind that the things they're going to inspect are the things they've always inspected. You know, at the end of the day, infection control is infection control. Radiation protection is radiation protection. It's all the same stuff. So you don't need to concern yourselves or listen to scaremongering. This CQC's completely changed everything. They haven't. They're just really changing their processes. It's all the same stuff. Throughout these quality statements, though, there is a significant focus on continuous improvement and demonstrating continuous improvement. And again, isn't that something we would want to do? Hope that our practices continuously get better. Now, the means by which we can make sure we continually improve are through feedback. So that's feedback from patients and feedback from your team. It's from audit. So you undertake your audits, you find some things that are not quite in place, you put them right, and there you've improved. Same with risk assessments. The really important thing, though, about feedback, audit, and risk assessments is that you have evidence that the actions arising have been acted on. Otherwise, it's a waste of your time and money. So that's the really important thing about feedback, audit, and risk assessments. The quality statements, if you're looking for something to read to put you to sleep at night, there are 34 quality statements on the CQC website, and these are statements that practices, when I say practices, I'm putting this in a dental context because it goes across all of health and social care, should live up to. And they are expressed as what they call we statements. I'll show you two quick examples. They purport to show what is needed to deliver high quality care, and the aim is to make the CQC more consistent. There is a lot of inconsistency. You will talk to people who've had a CQC inspection and say, oh, they were there for half an hour, it was a piece of cake. In my practice, they were there for 9 hours and took the place apart. So you don't know which inspector you're going to get. So they're aiming for more consistency, but you still don't know who you're going to get. The quality statements fit into the safe, effective, caring and responsive like that. So there are 8 in safe and so on. They're spread throughout those. These are called the 5 key questions that they ask. And just a quick example of what they are looking for. So under safe, this is one of the quality statements. If you remember, there are 8 quality statements under safe. So we assess and manage the risk of infection. So this is you speaking now as a practice. We in our practice, you in your new practices, we assess and manage the risk of infection. We detect and control the risk of it spreading, share any concerns with any appropriate agencies promptly. And so what you then need to do, or rather, if you work with a compliance company, what the compliance company will do for you is show you what evidence is needed to comply with that quality statement. So there are safe has 8 quality statements in it. Well led, this is what they say about one of the quality statements in well led. There are effective governance and management systems. Information about risks, performance and outcomes is used effectively to improve care, and there is an inclusive and positive culture of continuous learning and improvement. Now, I really don't think you need to worry about those. That is the kind of practice you would want to run if you are running a practice that is safe, effective, caring, responsive and well led. So you don't need to worry about, oh, the quality statement this or the quality, and I need evidence of that. You just need to run your practice in a compliant manner. So how does it all go so horribly wrong? Well, you're going to be starting up, or you have started up your new practices, and your focus now that you've got through your CQC registration is almost always going to be on delivering great clinical care, building a great team, managing a great team, recruiting a great team, and making sure that the finances add up. So it's very, very easy indeed to let things slip and to be too busy for compliance and to stop seeing the dangers and become complacent. Very, very easy. Do you agree with that, Claire?
100%.
Right, can you just tell us a little bit of your experience in too busy for compliance?
So,
go to the microphone.
So obviously, as a practice manager and your dental staff, your practice is always busy. There's always things that are going to come up in the day. You're off dealing with broken equipment, staff issues. So for me, to have something as a set diary to remind me of tasks that need doing, even if it's a pop-up to say this is overdue, I've got a list of things that I need to do. So I would say to all of you guys, even if you're starting and you're looking to set up a squat, start researching some of the compliance platforms and the software that you can use. They're invaluable. I've worked in dentistry for over 25 years. Back in the day when everything was paperwork and folders, and then the compliance portals started coming out, you can't do it without. There's loads available out there. We use dentistry compliance, which is fantastic. But have demos with people, and that will be your basic sort of framework to remind you of where you need to be.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And I think probably what a compliance platform will do is avoid letting things slip, because you've got a reminder there to make sure things don't slip. And I do support what Claire says, in that there are other compliance platforms out there apart from dentistry compliance. So get demos with everybody. Decide what it is that will work for you. John talked about the dream patient. You want to be perhaps thinking about the dream support. Is it important to you to have personal support? Is it important that when you make a phone call, somebody picks up the phone? Or is it more important to you that you just have remote service there when you need it? So think carefully about what it is that will help you avoid letting things slip. So we're going to look now at where it goes wrong and what the frequent areas that we see. So we have a team of practice advisors who will go into practice. They will do mock CQC inspections for our clients and our members. And so these are the things they see. Funnily enough, these are the things that also come up in the CQC reports, the inspection reports, that the CQC finds the same thing. So, and you would expect that. So this is a really big one, and it causes all kinds of hassle. So your policies are either out of date, unsigned, or not understood by the team, or they don't reflect what actually happens in your practice. So I talked yesterday about how the CQC hates to see, this is the infection control policy for brackets insert practice name, because I can guarantee that policy will then say that you've got a decontamination room, that you've got an ultrasonic cleaner, you've got a washer disinfector, irrespective of whether you've got those things or not. So your policies should really just be your manual for how you run the practice. Okay? And keeping them up to date, yes, but your compliance platform will do that for you and make sure that they are accurate, which is why I agree with what Claire says. Doing this yourself is just too difficult. Yes, if you absolutely want to spend all your evenings and weekends on it, but I really wouldn't recommend it. So those are the things we see, and then we see this a lot as well. So we believe at Dentistry Compliance in only giving you what you need, not what you don't need. So if you don't have a CCTV, you don't need a CCTV policy. You're just giving yourself extra work. We call it death by paperwork. And literally, if you have far too much stuff, far too many policies, so you have 200, 300, 400 or whatever, you can't stay on top of that. You simply can't. You would spend all day, every day on that. And there are much more important things to be doing than that. So when you choose a system, make sure that it has a reasonable number of policies, not too many. Only use the ones that you need, not the ones you don't need. Make sure they're up to date, in date with a review, and they must be signed and understood by all. Claire, how do you make sure that your team knows what's in your policies?
So as part of our induction process, I'll go through policies with all new starters. So we've got a clean sheet and I know they're all up to date. So the software again will help me with that. It supplies all the templates for every single policy that you need. And like Pat said, one thing I would recommend is sitting down, taking the time to go through these policies and update them and individualise them to your practice. It can be a whole team approach, so I don't do it all myself, I delegate. I'll get the girls to have a look through policies and they can be updating, you know, decon, you know, do we have a washer, a disinfector, just tweaking those policies for me. But yeah, as part of the induction process, I'll sit down the new starter, they'll go through the policies. Dentistry compliance, one thing I love about it is that you're not printing everything off. The policies are there for them to flick through and there's a button to click to say acknowledged, and that's enough for the CQC to see that that particular staff member has acknowledged that policy and it's all recorded on a report for me. So yeah, that's been really helpful.
Thank you, Claire. And just in case you're wondering, she's not on commission. This is another big one. So this is incomplete or missing audits and risk assessments, or they're present, going back to what I said about continuous improvement and not wasting your time. They've been done, but there's no evidence that the findings have been acted on. Or, even worse, or just as bad, they don't reflect reality. So I'll ask to see an infection control audit, having looked around the practice perhaps, and I've noticed that one or two things aren't right, and then I see tick, 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 everything's fine, when actually everything isn't. So that's a waste of time doing it in the first place. And you've got no evidence that it reflects reality. So the idea of an audit is to give you information to act on, not so that you tick boxes. These are the other ones that we see that are missing. Fire, very often. So fire risk assessment, we would always recommend that you have an outside authority to do the initial fire risk assessment, that you follow up on any actions in it, and then after that you can do your own fire risk assessments in the practice. So those we commonly find are missing or inaccurate. And then when it comes to audits, infection control audit must be done every 6 months. Radiographic quality, we often find that practitioners are recording the wrong the wrong things for their radiographic quality. So it used to be 1, 2 and 3 used to have to record, and just very recently we've done a pile of patient record audits. A lot of people are still doing that. It needs to be acceptable or not acceptable, so that's changed recently. Antimicrobial prescribing, patient records, we often find those are missing or inaccurate. So what do you do about that? Make sure that they're all carried out when they should be by, and you know who's going to take responsibility. And then again, most important of all, make sure that whatever comes out of them is acted on. Never ever do either risk assessments or audits as a pointless tick box exercise. So when it was done on paper, it was a waste of paper. Now it's just a waste of time and money. Poor understanding of what significant incidents are. So significant incidents are things that are significant. So they're not all necessarily adverse, but it's the adverse ones that are the most important ones we want to capture. Significant incidents can be something that's gone really well. So a patient's treatment and they send some flowers, that's a significant incident because it doesn't happen every day. So capture those, record them. Not just for the CQC, although the CQC likes to see that, but do it as a morale boost for the team. Significant adverse incidents, so that's things that have gone horribly wrong. And again, it's not necessarily something like the X-ray arm falling off onto a patient. That's something that's a disaster. It's, well, actually the lab work hasn't been delivered back. And it goes on happening. That's a significant adverse incident. So capture it, record it, talk about it, and then decide what you're going to do to stop it happening. Because guess what? If you don't change what you're doing, it will keep on happening. Or perhaps you've got a team member that's always late for work, find out why they're always late for work. That's a significant incident. And then do something to make sure that it changes. Because if you don't, it'll go on happening. Do you agree with that, Claire?
Yeah, completely.
Anything you want to add?
One thing I'd say with significant incidents and anything like audits and things like that, the CQC, I've had the luck or misfortune of being part of 3 CQC inspections over my career, and they're not someone to be scared of. It's just making sure that in practice, things are going to go wrong. There will be big things that happen, significant incidents that you're like, oh God, we shouldn't have let that happen. And it happens, it's fine. But as long as you've made a report to say that you've noted what's happened, you've spoken as a team, how it won't happen again, anything that you can put in line to ensure that you've all learned from the problem. The CQC love to see that. So, things are going to happen that, are beyond your control, but just prove that you can learn from it and keep a report of that on file.
And now I'm going to say something you're not going to expect me to say. Don't do any of this stuff for the regulators. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because if you don't make a change, then these things that have gone wrong will go on going wrong. So it'll help you to have a better run practice. Yes, wonderful that the CQC think it's great. That's not the reason to do it, though. The reason to do it and do all of this stuff is because it's the right thing to do. This servicing, inspection, validation and maintenance of equipment is either out of date or no evidence it's been undertaken ever. You might find that very hard to believe. You're going to be setting up practices with nice shiny new equipment. So when I say ever, I think the longest gap I've seen was 8 years when a practice hadn't had their equipment serviced and maintained. And guess what? If you don't, it'll stop working and that will cost you money. So again, don't do it for the regulator. Do it because if you don't, there are consequences. So it is essential that you schedule all necessary equipment servicing, inspection, validation and maintenance. Those are all the things you have to do. And there are a number of ways that you could do it. You could keep a paper diary. Don't think we live in the paper era anymore, really. You could keep an electronic diary. Some practices like a whiteboard. Some practices have a whiteboard and then about 1 million post-its on it. That's a very interesting way to manage your scheduling, or other. And by other, I mean having a system that then prompts you when you need to do it, which is what Claire described just now. Patient records. Now, I mentioned just now that the CQC will look at patient records, or the GDC registrant will look at patient records. And this is not actually just protecting you from the regulator, the CQC. This is also from the GDC perspective. So really, really important that you keep good patient records. I would say actually that you keep excellent patient records. Now, we don't have time to, and this is not what we're here for, to do today. I could talk for hours on patient records. What we see very often is records that are either incomplete or far, 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 far too much information. Now, my generation kept records that just had pretty much nothing in them. So it'd be exam complains of, and then no treatment required. And that was a patient record, okay? That's far too little information. What we see now, though, is this huge over-reliance on templates, which are a route to disaster very often. So templates that really lay out in great detail what you've done for every single patient. Now, it isn't possible that you've done all of that stuff for every single patient. So if you are going to use templates, please make sure that they are tailored to what you've just done for the patient, because that will really get you into vast amounts of trouble, not with the CQC, because they won't comment on it, but with the GDC. And I've spent a lot of time helping dentists who've got themselves into really big trouble at the GDC. There are well-known tales that go around of dentists who have allegedly given smoking cessation advice to 7-year-olds, and then when they're in front of the GDC and the GDC says, "Why did you give smoking cessation advice to a 7-year-old?" and the dentist says, "I didn't," and they said, "Well, it says here you did. Did you lie?" says the GDC barrister, and because that then invalidates the whole of the rest of your record, unless you did actually have a 7-year-old smoking, which I guess you could have done. But anyway, I really would counsel you to be careful with the use of templates. Poor evidence of valid consent. Valid consent is really poorly understood. And really what a lot of we see is that it's just informed consent. So informed consent is where you tell the patient stuff, but you have no idea whether they've understood it or not, and therefore it's not valid. And I think huge numbers of us get into trouble thinking that we've got consent, and it's not until we're standing in front of the GDC and they're saying, "Well, where's your consent?" Consent is not about signing a consent form. It's about a process. More of that another time, perhaps. And infrequent, inaccurate patient record audits. Now, I expect nearly everyone in this room to disagree with this. This is my personal opinion. I think that given that what you're trying to do with a patient record audit is protect yourself as a dentist, I think it's essential that you audit your own records and that you find out yourself that your records maybe need a bit of adjustment. When you're auditing your records, make sure that your audit reflects the College of General Dentistry's standards guidance, because that is the guidance that the GDC goes by. When you're auditing your records, be very honest, because if you're not honest with your records, that's not telling you anything. So if you haven't recorded BPEs, you haven't taken x-rays with the appropriate frequency, make sure you note it and do something about it, and then act on your findings. And then if your findings are disappointing, then re-audit again soon. And if your findings are okay, satisfactory, then maybe every 6 to 12 months will be enough. Right, this is a really big one that I'm going to just bring Claire in on. So this is something that is very easy to get wrong. So inadequate recruitment policy and procedures and processes, and poor evidence of what the CQC will say is safe recruitment practices. Now, yes, you want to recruit the A team. Yes, you want to recruit the dream team. You also want to make sure that you don't have anyone in the practice that you take on inadvertently that has a criminal record. So incomplete pre-employment checks, I think, is something that we quite often see. And personnel records as well. So before we move on to that, Claire, do you want to just talk to us about how you manage your recruitment procedures?
So recruitment's a biggie. Obviously, you're going to have staff come in and out. So I would say you need a little bit of structure, a checklist almost of what you need for every new starter, even from interview process. So have you got a structured interview system? Have you got a form that you fill out for every single interview? Do you score those interviewees? Can you show that that part of recruitment has been fair? And then moving on to when a new employee starts is, so again, the software I use will have a checklist, so I can download every single bit of information I need for a new employee. So your induction process is really, really important. And again, like Pat said, don't let it be a tick box exercise. So it will be, your induction could involve showing them where the fire exits are, medical emergency drugs. Our induction process and the paperwork is a 3-page document that we go through and we tick. But at the same time, I'll sit with the staff members and explain everything to them. So make sure that your induction process has gone through, they understand it's signed off. Make sure you've got DBS checks for all staff and you understand what DBS you need. So whether it be a standard or enhanced, whether you've got admin staff or nurses. Dentists obviously as well, you're going to need the DBS for those. Hep B, you need proof of everything. There's a lot that you need for new starters, and you're not going to remember it all. Like myself, you're busy, so yeah, get yourself on some software that you've got that checklist, and make sure you've recorded everything from day one that you've had the new starter in with you.
Thank you, Claire. And we do often find, as does the CQC, that personnel records are incomplete, and these are the sorts of things. Bizarrely, we quite often find that professional indemnity, or the correct professional indemnity, isn't in place. So you perhaps haven't got the cover you need to do implants or the kind of work that you're doing. So what do you need? You need appropriate DPS disclosures. I mentioned that very briefly yesterday. So you need different types of DBSs depending on what your role is in the practice. You must have a CV with a full history that has the dates, the exact dates, as in the 14th of September 2005 to the 17th of August 2018. You must be the exact dates in the CV. References, you must have 2 references. I am very ambivalent about references, but it is a requirement because references can't really tell you anything these days. You need evidence of relevant skills, experience, qualifications, training, legal entitlement to work in the UK, proof of identity with a photograph, and then a note of, you don't need to do a medical history for every new recruit, but you do need an understanding of any physical or mental conditions relevant to that person's ability to do the job. That's quite a tricky one. The reason that we have a locked filing cabinet there is really just to say that's not how I expect you to keep paper records necessarily, and it's fine to keep them electronically. Personal data must be stored completely securely. So that is, if you do have paper records, they must be in a locked filing cabinet, and it must only be possible to be accessed by people who have a need to see the information. So if you keep your personnel records electronically, then it must be password protected and limited to only the people that need to see it. And that applies to your patient data and your staff data. We often see complaints handling hasn't been done particularly well, or that you haven't tracked your complaints or analysed them for trends. A little bit like significant incidents. If you don't track your complaints and analyse them to see if there is a trend, then it will keep happening. So it does make good sense to track your complaints and analyse them. You also must have a complaints policy procedure, code of practice for when a patient wants to complain, and you will need to give that to the patient. Now, new startup practices, beautiful practices, any practices, nobody wants to encourage a patient to complain. But you do have to let the patients know that if they want to make a complaint, they can. So even something as simple as something somewhere in the practice that says, if you're delighted with your treatment, please tell a friend. If there've been anything you'd like to discuss, if anything that hasn't quite gone to plan, then please tell us, so that they know that they can tell you and they don't go straight to the CQC or the GDC. If you've got a great relationship with your patients, and we talked about that yesterday and today, then if you've built a great relationship with your patients, then they are less likely to go and complain somewhere else, and they will come to you. So you must have a complaints policy, you must have all the right stuff displayed. I would suggest strongly that you have a complaints tracker and you analyse it, and really important that you have evidence taken to avoid a recurrence. And good outcomes. You want good outcomes. You're not always going to get the outcomes you want, but you do need to get to a satisfactory outcome. Poor evidence of supervision and induction. Claire's talked about that very helpfully. CPD records and ongoing training. Now, I said that we'd talk a little bit about governance. I'm aware that we're kind of running out of time a wee bit now. So I'm just going to go through this and just sort of highlight certain points here. So it's very, very common to find poor evidence of leadership and management. And that's not surprising, really. You know, we don't learn to do this at dental school, and it's kind of something you have to pick up as you go along, which isn't okay, really. But I think, you know, being part of a community like this, where you can see great leaders in action, I have so much respect and admiration for what Bobby has built, both with his own practice and with this group here. This is a tremendous community. Support each other, and it will give you great guidance on the way to go forward. Unfortunately, some of these things you do have to learn the hard way. I've learnt it the hard way. Bobby told his stories this morning about how he learnt it the hard way. You'll all have to learn it the hard way too. But having a community like this that supports you is really, really important. And that, you know, when you hear to great speakers like Laurie yesterday, incredible story, clearly phenomenal leadership, phenomenal management. And to hear those stories and then emulate what they've done, I think will really be a help to you. You need to have regular team meetings and actions taken as a result of the meetings, and you need to make sure that team meetings don't turn into whinging sessions. Have you ever had that, Claire?
I think it's especially when you're putting together an agenda for a team meeting, you need to get positives in, because it is, you know, a lot of the time it's what has gone wrong, what do we need to work on. You need to really mix it up, because there will be lots of positives as well, and your staff need to feel that it can be an open discussion and it's not just management going on at the staff about what needs to change. So yeah, get everyone involved. We have different members of staff lead team meetings for us, but yeah, always go in with positives.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to have a rule, actually, or still do have a rule in our practice meetings, which is if you bring a problem to the meeting, then bring a solution as well, and then you can discuss the solution together. And then I think this is something you believe passionately in, is there, Claire, isn't it? The last one there, team working and sharing compliance tasks, and you've already talked about that, I think. But that is so important. So you have a safeguarding lead, you have an infection control lead, you have a radiation protection lead, you have a data protection lead, you have everybody involved in this. So it's not all down to the Claires of this world, and it involves the whole team. So I'm not going to read through this list. I'm just going to flick through it quickly so you can see the amount of training that your team members need to have. Do by all means please take photos of the screen if you'd like to. These are all the things, and it's a lot more than the GDC requires. So you need all of those things, all of those things, and all of those things. So a lot of training. Now, some of it will be face-to-face, some of it will be online. GDC is very keen on what they call blended learning. So that's a combination of face-to-face learning and online training. So all your training should not be online. Safeguarding is a big one that you should have face-to-face so that you can talk about issues in the practice. Infection control. We often see that their procedures are not compliant with HTM 0105. If you don't know what HTM 0105 is, you need to find out. That is the guidance for primary dental care that was written in 2010. You need to make sure that you undertake an infection control audit every 6 months, that everybody has infection control training. The policy must have a named lead, must describe your procedures. I mentioned yesterday, make sure ventilation is adequate, a difficult thing to do, I think, particularly if you've got a listed building. You might need a ventilation engineer to help you with that. And do make sure that your procedures and protocols for managing emergency drugs and equipment are up to date, and that your drugs are all in date, that things like your defibrillator pads are all in date. Make sure CPR, basic life support training, is undertaken annually. And if you do sedation or planning on doing it, then you must make sure that intermediate life support training is in place. Make sure, this is the guidance, this is where you go for guidance on everything to do with what you need to do for medical emergencies. The UK Resuscitation Council is the standard for that. We started at the beginning talking about the CQC looking for evidence that your practice is all of those things, and then we've got different things highlighted in red here. So effective, caring and responsive. How do we have evidence that your practice is effective, caring and responsive? Well, who's the only person who can tell you whether that you are effective, caring and responsive? Absolutely. So ask them. So make sure you carry out surveys and you gather feedback. Doesn't have to all be done via a survey. So patients will make ad hoc comments to the nurse or the receptionist or practice manager. Capture those comments. That's all really important feedback. If you're going to use a survey, which I would highly recommend, make sure that you the questions you ask are really important. Make sure also that you have a means of benchmarking. So let's say your patient satisfaction or your staff satisfaction survey comes back and says 85% of your patients or staff are really satisfied. Well, if you don't know what the benchmark is, how do you know if 85% is good? You know, if the benchmark is 75%, then 85% is great. What if the benchmark though is 95%? Then maybe 85% isn't so good. So ideally, I would say do it digitally, do it on a tablet, or send a patient a URL to complete at home. This is our survey, which doesn't look very exciting on there, but it is very effective and has national benchmarking. So every patient and practice that's ever undertaken one of our surveys is reflected in the national benchmarking. And there are tens of thousands of surveys in there. So staff feedback should be anonymised, and again, for continuous improvement and for business efficiency, you need evidence that you have acted on the results. This is the biggest problem that is with compliance, and we spoke about it, I was speaking about it earlier to somebody who's setting up a squat. The biggest problem is you don't know what you don't know. So how do you know, if you try and do this on your own, how do you know you've got it right? How do you know that you've interpreted things incorrectly? There's a lot of grey areas in what we do. And how do you know that your interpretation is the same as the regulators? And I'm going to say regulators there rather than just CQC, because it's the GDC as well. Although breaking great news, GDC is finally changing. So fingers crossed on that one. Now, as we mentioned yesterday, there's a lot to balance, and the right technology and digital solutions can help you. So you can automate a lot of things. So compliance management software, we've talked about that. You can automate compliance processes, you can automate audits, you can automate digital checklists. This is what our system looks like. It's a task-based system, and what we've tried to do is to make it as simple and as intuitive as possible. We have automated audits. All of those audits and more are automated. We can also do a mock CQC inspection for you. Other providers can do all of these things as well. And it's RAG rated. So this is RAG rated, means red, amber, green rated. So it tells you what things should be a priority. Very useful thing to do. We have automated infection control log, digital checklists and logs. Digitalization and automation is fantastic. Do make sure, though, that it doesn't create, and it is possible that it creates more work than it needs to. We very strongly believe that compliance software should support the day job and not be the day job. And I think that's how you use it, isn't it, Claire? Very much so. So there is such a lot to balance. We can help you, and those are the things that we can help you with. So we also have a phenomenal consent application, which you may find interesting. We can also come and do it all for you as well. So we have a growing band of people who actually don't want to do any of this stuff themselves and just say, can you handle it for us? And we will do that. And we have an HR platform. And I'm going to finish with that again. So this is my dog, who sadly I lost last year, but very much, just like a dog's not just for Christmas, compliance is not just for your inspection. It should be how you run your business. Not because the regulators say you should do it like that, because it's the right thing to do. Thank you very much. I know I've run over a little bit. So, and whatever help you need, please ask for it. Thank you.